Good evening, and welcome to the Standing Committee of Council for December 9th, 2024. Call the meeting to order at 6:40 p.m. We have one addition to the agenda this evening under new business. We're going to move 7I as 7H as an excused absence, and we're going to move the O&M and capital budget presentations to following that. Sorry, H will be the excused absence, and I will be the O&M and capital budget. And I think that's it for additions or amendments to the agenda. Looking for a motion to adopt the agenda. Councillor Dufert, seconded by Councillor Bouchard. All in favor? Motion carries. Any declarations of interest this evening? Right, seeing nothing. Moving on, we have on Teams with us representatives from Dillon Consulting. They're going to be doing a presentation on the water treatment plant feasibility study and the preliminary design. So I will turn that over to Glenn, and then Glenn can handle that from there.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor, and good evening, Council. I think just looking at their teams there, Josh, are you you're connected, but still waiting on David? Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, he just was restarting his computer. He should be joining any moment now.
Okay. And he'll be doing the presentation then.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll, Deputy Mayor, if you want, we could skip to the next item on the agenda while we wait.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that maybe we can move ahead. We also have with us this evening Sergeant Phil Unger, the RCMP, that's going to be doing a couple of the monthly report presentations for us. Typically, the RCMP present these to the mayor, but occasionally we'll have them come in and present to us in person. So welcome, Sergeant Unger, and the floor is yours.
Sit by the mic there, or pick the mic up if you want. No, well, hold the mic in your hand then, and you'll be fine.
Hi there. Thank you for the invitation. For those of you who don't know me, Phil Unger, I've been with the RCMP for 17 years. I was in Hay River from 2011 to 2016 with traffic. Went and did a few other posts, and I came back in 23. And it's a pleasure to be back. Yeah, so I know, and this is my fault, the October report only got submitted in November with the November report. So in October, we had 222 calls for service as a detachment area, and then I broke it down. So there was 193 that were specifically for the town of Hay River. The other ones would have been KFN or Enterprise. So in the month of October, we had members attend the youth center, engaging with youth, conducting school zone enforcement throughout the month. We have an FNIPP position, which was in my report, I think, in August or September. And so that member is pretty much predominantly dedicated to community engagement. So going to the youth centers, going to the schools. Very similar to Jordan, but as a regular member. And so he met with Principal Lynn Beck and was dealing with some bullying issues. We had participation with the Hay River Rec Center events. We attended the Colboreal and PA school and organized Spookorama. And for traffic safety, which is one of the initiatives, we there were 7 summary offense tickets that were issued. There were 4 charges of impaired driving in the month of October, out of 5 occurrences or complaints of impaired driving. And then our harm reduction for the month of October, we had success in our high risk management offender management program, as well as we conducted 17 patrols of Rose Trailer Park, 71 in the downtown area and arena and library, continuing to deter and detect illicit behavior, which included the disposal of liquor on 6 occasions. We did have 10 files related to the sale of illicit narcotics within the community, and there were 42 prisoners for the month of October, and 38 of those were from within the town specific. Do you want me just to continue on to November's and then field questions? Yeah. Okay. So the month of November, there was 245 total calls for service. 211 of them were within the town of Hay River. For a month of November, again, attending the youth centers and engaging with youth, school zone enforcement, there's a little less of it in November. Our FNIPP member actually made a number of presentations to the different grades in DJ at Lynn Beck's request regarding bullying. We attended the Remembrance Day ceremonies at DJ, Princess Alexandria, and at the community event. We were part of the mock emergency at the Hay River Airport with HRFD and the GNWT staff. And we had a float in the Christmas parade, and then we were in a friendly competition with the HRFD for raising money for the month of November. For our traffic initiatives in the month of November, we had 5 summary offense tickets that were issued. There was 1 charge for impaired driving out of 6 occurrences or complaints of impaired driving. And for our harm reduction, we had 18 patrols of the trailer park, 20 of the downtown area, including the library and arena, and we disposed of liquor on 7 occasions. With our high-risk offender management, we had 7 curfew checks, which aided in bringing a couple offenders in front of the courts for breaching their court orders. And we had 12 files related to the illicit narcotics within the community. A further 23 files were related to the investigation or follow-up regarding suspicious activity or persons. We did seize a number of handguns and long guns in criminal investigations, and we seized approximately $6,000 along with crack cocaine, fentanyl in amounts consistent with trafficking. We had 44 prisoners in the month of November. 39 of those were within the town of Hay River. Barring questions you guys might have.
Thank you, Sergeant. Go ahead, Councillor Bouchard.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Phil. Much appreciated. And so it sounds like you have a full contingent of staff right now, and obviously I think some of the questions in the community are always around the drugs and some drug busts recently, but continue to see drug issues and some with firearms lately, fires type stuff. So I'm just kind of describing what you and maybe G Division are working on to kind of try to continue to deal with these issues in the community, try to, I guess the good citizens of Hay River, what's happening to kind of protect them from some of this stuff that's going on. So can you just give me an update?
Yeah, absolutely. So our contingent is supposed to be 13 members. We have 10. One of them's on RFT. He'll have graduated or will graduate RFT in February. So that just means, so he came out of depot, he has 6 months of on-the-road training. So the first 2 months he has to be with his field coach. The second 2 months he can be with anyone who has the field coaching course, and then for his final 2 months he can be with any member that has 2 years service. So he's not quite a full-fledged member, so I guess I'll call it 9.5. With regards to some of the files that happened, obviously with arson and the violence and that, G Division, the territory, has started a crime reduction team. It's still in its infancy stages. I think they actually only have 1 person in that team currently. but he did come down with a couple of members of the General Investigative Section out of Yellowknife, and they were down for about a day and a half and just helped suppress, I guess, for lack of a better term, attending some of our more prominent houses and doing door knocks and just making sure they knew we were there and watching, and not necessarily in uniform like I am. They were driving plainclothes vehicles. So that's one. We do have a new dog in the territory in Yellowknife, which is obviously good. That specific dog is not a drug dog. It's it's a criminal apprehension explosives dog, but at least it's a second dog within the territory, which is obviously helpful. As you said, it was a busy month really in November, especially with the fires, which was sort of beneficial because they started it and it led to more information / things coming up. So yeah, I believe we've so far seized 3 handguns. Special, well, actually 4, because one was sort of found near the shooting from November 9th. I don't actually know if it was involved. It was a 10 millimeter. We found 45 casings on the November 9th shooting. So there likely is a 45 caliber firearm still out there. But so we have a 10 mil, a 38 special, a 9 mil that had a 3D printed lower, which is so at the top the slide and barrel were a Glock, but the bottom half, the grip, is basically a 3D printed one, which is something we haven't seen in Hay River yet. And then obviously the cash and currency. We actually executed a warrant on Friday and recovered some stolen firearms. We've had a few files actually just in the month of December of people's sheds and that being broken into and long guns being stolen. So we are actively working on files like that. It continues. We have a few places that we're obviously observing. And I guess that would be kind of it currently. I wouldn't say locally at the detachment, it's like the side of our desk specifically working on the drug stuff at the moment. But we are cognizant of it, and we've been getting a little bit of an uptick of information from within the community, which is obviously very helpful in us making some of these inroads that we have been.
Thank you. So does that, is that still what you're finding to be a fairly common problem, is lack of information coming from the community? I know we've touched on that quite a bit over the last couple of years and sort of tried to encourage that and through different means, but are you still finding that to be kind of a major challenge?
Yeah, definitely a little bit. Obviously with like the finding of handguns and some shootings recently. So there was the shooting on Pine on the 9th of November, and then the 11th of November, there was a shooting in the Park Place area. So obviously I think that hinders people's comfort level of bringing information forward. And then, not that it's not useful, but like a Crime Stopper tip is useful, but it's only useful to an extent if I can say that someone I don't know has said this information. And so it gives me a starting point, but it's not something that by itself would like get me into a place. So there's that hindrance. So yes, I mean, I think obviously people are a little bit concerned with like the escalating violence. So there's that kind of problem.
Any other questions or comments from council? Go ahead, Councillor Duford.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to say that, yeah, the harm reduction program is great, and I have worked downtown, and I see some people strolling around, and it's nice to see it's very visible. And the second thing was, who won the challenge?
I'm guessing. I haven't actually asked Jacob, but I'm guessing for the raising of funds the fire department did. For the better mustaches, I might have to say.
Yeah.
Biased and say myself and our group, but know for sure. I would like to mention that, as you guys know, we're fortunate enough to have the Premier as well as the Minister of MACA locally. And I know that they're both working hard on civil forfeiture legislation and that. So, I mean, there's other avenues that are being worked on that, say, aren't necessarily like kicking in doors, but they're important because obviously the loss of drugs and or money to these organized crime groups, that's what hurts. What's going to get the money and then the money that they've made. And so currently the money that we seize goes into the federal government's coffers. It goes to the Attorney General of Canada. So where it goes, I don't know. And then it, like if a charge is stayed in court, that person has the remedy of getting it back quite easily, whereas presumably civil forfeiture legislation, it's really like a 50 plus 1%. You have to basically prove that your money was legitimate. So if you have like $17,000 in 20s, you show me where the $17,000 in 20s came from that was legitimate. Otherwise, it goes to the territory, which would be a boon for the local territory for sure. So.
I see on the screen there, Mayor Jamieson, you have a question? You're muted there.
Should have, I guess, been more prepared. I can't specifically off the top of my head. We have had a lot. Like we had a file in, I think it was May or April, and like we probably got about $70,000 street value of product off. The one from like the end of November 22nd, I mean, we got 3,000 cash, and I probably say we got about maybe another $3,000 in product. And then we've actually had a couple just straight cash seizures, but I could definitely have those numbers for you for December. I could try to find out the exact amount of drugs.
One more, Councillor Bouchard.
Yeah, thanks, Phil, again for coming. I know last year we worked on the loitering bylaw and stuff like that, and I mean, I hope that's giving you guys some avenues to deal with some of the loitering downtown and other areas type thing. But just any other messages to the community, or what you would like to see from our perspective, if there's bylaws, other things that we can be working on, or what we're looking to get the citizens of Hay River to assist your job type thing?
No, obviously encouraging the flow of information to the detachment. As I said, I will take anything that gives me a flag of, hey, look over here. As I said, when I'm saying that, like Crime Stoppers tips. I did bring it up to Travis, a possible addition to the like the loitering bylaw, and one was that it could be a name change as well, but it's adding a bullying section. And we provided an example from an Alberta community where it's like it's one of the subsections. So you have like loitering, and like paragraph 6 or whatever would be like bullying. And again, it's just a tool, because bullying isn't a criminal offense. Obviously, it can have some serious repercussions, from depression up to like just concerns in the schools. So talking with Lynn Beck, we just chatted with Travis to bring forward to you guys as a possible amendment to that bylaw, if so fit. And again, it would just be to hopefully aid police in dealing with bullying. Otherwise, I think like the loitering bylaw, and that has definitely given us that extra tool. Again, I don't have the specific stats, but there have definitely been people ticketed under it for whether it's defecating or urinating in public or open liquor, that type of thing, loitering. And I wouldn't say it's definitely not being abused, which is a good thing. Like, obviously that could be a concern. I think it's been used for those repeat, continued people, and I think it's made a difference. We're definitely not seeing all the same people doing the same thing over and over, so.
Okay, anything else from council before we let the sergeant get it here? Well, thank you, Phil. Again, we appreciate all the work you and your crew do, and always appreciate you coming in and giving an update. Thanks. Thanks. Yeah. Okay, we can move back. I think we have everybody now from Dylan. They're all there. Okay. So we can move back to announcements, award ceremonies, and presentations with that presentation from Dylan Consulting on the water treatment plant. So, Glenn, I'll turn that back over to you again.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Mayor. So we have on the team's invite on the screen, you'll see Dave McKenna in the bottom right corner, and also supporting him is Joshua Thomas. And Dylan's been working with the town of River now probably for 2 years really on our water treatment plant feasibility and now preliminary design work. And we're at the conclusion or nearing the conclusion of that. So we're bringing forward to council today a presentation on that work that has been completed. And I'm going to pass the mic to Joshua. I see you're muted right now. Or sorry, to David. I see you're muted right now. But go ahead, David. I'll just confirm that I can hear you properly and you can hear us.
Yep, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We can hear you with no feedback. So you're perfect to go, and we can see your slide deck. So thank you. I assume we'll just take questions at the end,
Sure,
David?
Thanks very much. Pardon me?
So I'll just assume that council can ask questions at the end. I'll help facilitate that.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you very much. I'd just like to start thanking Mayor and Council for inviting us to speak today. We engineers love to talk at great length about our projects, so it's great. Hopefully you won't have to stop me, and I'll stop on cue. So as mentioned, we're going to give you a quick update of the status of the water treatment plant project. I'm here with another one of my colleagues. I'll just give a very brief introduction. My name is Dave McKenna. I'm the technical lead for the water and wastewater treatment group at Dylan Consulting. I'm a partner with the firm, and I'm from the East Coast. And then Josh, I'll give a quick presentation or introduction here.
Hi everyone, my name is Josh. I'm a water wastewater EIT with Dylan Consulting, and I'm in our Ontario group, specifically in our Kitchener office.
All right, so we'll just give you a quick background for the presentation this evening. So we'll give you a quick background on the project, an overview of what is currently occurring. We'll discuss where the proposed new wastewater treatment or water treatment plant would be located in the community. Some of the challenges that have been encountered with the project. We'll do very high level, not too technical, just go over the process, the water treatment process that would be involved. We'll talk as well about transition away from chlorine gas for a treatment chemical in the process. Talk about some of the design features of the plant, quick overview of the preliminary cost estimate, and then we'll have a question period after that. So just a quick background. So the existing plant services the town as well as Enterprise and two First Nations, Katladichi First Nation and Kakisa First Nation. The Katladichi First Nation, it's supplied by pipe that goes underneath the river, and it feeds a truck fill station on the other side of the river. The source water for the community is obtained from an inlet pipe that extends out into the Great Slave Lake. It's quite a long intake, approximately 8 kilometers, so it's quite far from shore. And the water treatment plant that you currently have, we would call that a conventional filtration process where they use media filters to treat the water. So some of the challenges in the existing water source, you have seasonal periods of very high turbidity. So that would be typically in the spring runoff period when a lot of runoff goes into the lake. That water is sourced and has to be successfully treated by the treatment plant. The existing plant is not always able to meet the Health Canada's guidelines for Canadian drink water quality. So that is the standard for treated water quality in Canada. Prior to Dylan getting involved, MACA had performed an assessment on existing water treatment plant and had determined that more than likely a new treatment process would be required. Due to those swings in source water quality, the plant is very difficult to operate. I always refer to it as riding a bucking bronco. You never know what's going to happen or when you're going to get thrown for a loop. The operator's done quite a good job trying to deal with some of those swings in water quality they have to deal with. And again, that's that high turbidity period in the spring, as well as an algae season, extended algae season in the August, September, October period that also poses a problem to operations. So Dylan got involved in 2021. So the final approved report was for the preliminary design was completed in early 2024. And the basis for that design was the extended population or projected population to the year 2047. So by the time the facility would be constructed, you'd be looking at approximately a 20-year life for that process. And again, this presentation will just give you an overview of the work completed to date. So this gives an overview in the community of where the water treatment plant is, in case anyone isn't entirely familiar. It's on the other side of the river from the town. In the location here with the red dot, and I just thought for context it would be good for people to understand that that dotted line represents the submerged pipe, the intake pipe that extends out 8 kilometers into the lake. So this gives an overview of the current plant site. The light gray outline building, I don't know if you can see my cursor on the screen, but that's your existing water treatment plant. There's a cloud over the top of it that says new parking lot. To the left of that existing building is the proposed space for the new water treatment plant. So that's that gray rectangle. The new site will also have a treated water tank, water reservoir, that's the large circle, and the smaller circle at the top represents a waste holding tank. So as wastes are produced from the treatment process, they're stored in that tank for offsite disposal. As well, down in the lower part of the page, there's a fuel tank as well as an emergency generator so that the facility can operate in the event of a power outage. Also to note, you can see the tag at the top of the picture. It shows the existing raw water intake. So that's the pipe that currently comes in from the lake and it enters into the existing water treatment plant. The proposal is to reuse that infrastructure. We would have a tie-in to that line during construction that would feed the new plant. And as part of construction phasing, the old plant would continue to operate until the new plant was ready to turn on, at which time valves would be turned to redirect the water, the source water, to the new treatment plant. The other point, the last bullet, the site high water elevation is confirmed for flood mitigation. So this site will be above the elevation for flooding, so we have mitigation for any future climate change, flooding, or other impacts. So I guess in summary, the site has been developed to reuse as much of the existing infrastructure as possible to try to manage the capital costs for the new project. So treatment challenges, I've already mentioned about the high turbidity in the water in the spring. The lake gets a lot of runoff and a lot of algae in the late summer season. some of those organics that come into the lake have a risk of creating disinfection byproducts. So those are compounds that are formed, are natural organic compounds that when reacted with chlorine as part of the disinfection process, they form a class of chemicals called disinfection byproducts. We have detected them here, so not surprisingly, we did expect to see them. Health Canada currently regulates those parameters. In respect of the history of water treatment, they're a relatively newer class of contaminants that are catching the attention of Health Canada and other regulators around the world. So the new treatment process would have to deal with those constituents. The existing media filtration process, it is very difficult to operate with the current source water variability. Operators often have to formulate a special custom recipe of chemicals to try to deal with the turbidity to make the filters work. It doesn't always work, and the operators always have to be watching very closely to when those seasonal swings occur in the water quality. So one of the goals for the new water treatment plant is to provide a process that's less susceptible to the upsets associated with those water quality swings. Media filtration is also, it can be a very challenging process for operators. It does require a strong understanding of chemistry because it requires chemical treatment to make the filters work properly. So, and it's a challenge for many small communities, especially northern remote communities. Always a challenge to retain operators skilled enough to be comfortable with these processes. So we also wanted to make sure the process you had was robust and that it wasn't susceptible to these chemical, strong knowledge of chemistry to enable the process to be reliable. Since 2011, there have been 7 boil water advisories. So there are challenges, as I noted, with the existing process. The objective for the new water treatment plant, more operator friendly, with less vulnerability to the source water quality, and able to meet all Health Canada guidelines. This is where it gets technical. I'll try not to bore people, but we're just showing a quick overview of the major blocks of the plant, so we can go over what would be included in your new system. Raw water would come from the lake through the 8-kilometer intake into an area with screens that would filter out any larger debris, sticks, fish, anything that would come through that intake. That would be followed by a coagulation process. So coagulation is a process where you inject a chemical coagulant into the water. It's almost like a glue, like a ball glue. It sticks to the smaller particles and makes them grow into bigger particles that can be easily removed by filtration. It also reacts with some of those organic molecules that we talked about that form disinfection byproducts, and it removes them from solutions so they don't become an issue of forming downstream disinfection byproducts. So we call those disinfection byproduct precursor organics. So the more of that material we can remove, the more likely that we'll be able to achieve the Canadian Health guidelines. Following coagulation is the filtration process. All surface water treatment plants in Canada have to have a filtration process that's approved by Health Canada. In this case, the ultrafiltration process has been recommended. It's a membrane filtration process. The best way I describe it to people, it's like taking a drinking water straw and putting lots of tiny pinholes in it. And then when you plug one in and put a vacuum on the end of the straw, you'll get liquid coming into the straw center, but you'll exclude the dirt particles and debris that's in the water. That's effectively how a membrane filter works. It removes particles to an extremely small size. So any bacteria or virus that are in the source water would be rejected by the membrane. There are some cleaning chemicals that are required to periodically clean the membranes. Those are typically an acid and chlorine and caustic. So depending on what the contaminants are in the water, there's a recipe of cleaning chemicals that are recommended from the suppliers of the membrane. You'll see a stream off the membrane filtration block. It's called backwash solids. So every filter has to be backwashed. As part of its normal cycle, it will filter solids until it gets too plugged up to work anymore. And that will trigger a backwash where they remove those solids from the process and start to basically renew the operation of the filter unit. Those backwash solids, in this case, are retained, and I'll talk about those in a moment. After filtration, the filtered water passes through an ultraviolet disinfection process. It's the UV block. UV is now almost exclusively used in surface water treatment for primary disinfection. After that, chlorine is added to carry a disinfectant concentration through the distribution system. So that keeps any regrowth of bacteria from occurring once the water leaves the treatment plant. And that chlorinated water, prior being distributed, it's held in the treated water reservoir in the plant. That's that large tank that I showed earlier. The backwash water with the new plant, there's a process that we're including where we will treat that backwash water and recapture the water portion and reject the solids. That allows us to recycle that water to the front end of the plant. So it makes the water treatment process much more efficient, and it reduces the amount of raw water that we need to bring into the system. As part of the project, we were asked to investigate alternatives for chlorine gas. Chlorine gas can be a relatively dangerous chemical. If there is a leak or a loss of containment, but if there ever is a leak, it's quite a serious safety event. So we did a study to look for alternatives. We looked at 3 potential alternatives to gas, chlorine, and that was sodium hypochlorite, which is simply chlorine bleach. It's very close in quality to what you'd buy in the grocery store for a bottle of Javex bleach. We looked at calcium hypochlorite, which is very similar to sodium hypochlorite, but it comes in a powder form. And then we looked at what's called on-site chlorine generation. I won't go into the details unless someone has questions after, but you can see the qualitative comparison we made, comparing each of these 3 options to each other. As you can see, the sodium hypochlorite came out as one of the favored products, and it was selected in the end as the preferred process for the new treatment plant. Some of the key design features, I mentioned the backwash treatment system for this facility, so it allows us to recirculate a portion of that waste stream back to the influent of the water plant. It does reduce the waste volume of the backwash waste by approximately a factor of 10 compared to what is happening now at the plant. So it does offset some of the raw water that's sourced from the lake, and it also reduces the amount of waste that you have to truck or remove from the site. The new system will have dedicated fire pumps that will satisfy the fire underwriters' requirements. So the existing transfer line that feeds water from the water treatment plant site to the in-town reservoir has users along it. So the firefighting pumps will allow response to a fire emergency along that corridor. I mentioned we're reusing the existing intake out into the lake. That's quite an important piece of infrastructure. It's quite expensive. So it was key to retain that, and that also was factored into the siting of the new water treatment plant to keep it close to where the existing intake ties into the existing wastewater or water treatment plant. The other factor in the design, we designed the building to accommodate modular building construction. So this would allow for off-site construction of modules, building modules, that would come to site. Probably the easiest way to understand it would be like a mobile modular home. They're fabricated off-site, and they come to site and they're stitched together to form a building. So it gives a little more flexibility depending on which way the town, for the next phase of engineering, decides to move forward. As part of the preliminary engineering, we're required to prepare a capital cost estimate. So this is considered a Class C level estimate, roughly plus or minus 20% accuracy based on the level of engineering that was performed. It's priced in $23, and the approximate cost was estimated at $23 million. At this time, it does include a 20% contingency in the number. So as we move forward with design, the level of accuracy, that estimate will also improve. So it'll move from a Class A, C to a B to a Class A, which is your tender estimate for the project. So I showed this on an earlier slide, just in a smaller view, so I just thought I'd put it up. Again, the large gray rectangle is going to be the new footprint for the water treatment plant. This would represent that rectangle. So this gives an overview of the footprint for the new building. I'll quickly go over just some of the major features in the plant. The membrane filters, the ultrafiltration units, are these 3 blocks on the upper left. The water comes into the plant at the raw water inlet. There's a set of pumps there that pump the water from the intake through the plant. On the upper left, goes through the automatic backwash strainers. It goes through the flocculation tank where the coagulant's injected, through the membranes, and then down to the UV treatment process. And from there, it goes out to the treated water tank. You can probably note there's some grid lines through the drawing. That's to show if a modular construction was selected, how the modules would be designed. And again, if this approach was used, these modules, typically they would be constructed in southern Canada and shipped to site. A crane would offload them from trucks, and then the general contractor would be required to stitch those modules together. They bolt up. So it's with a modular construction, if it's used, it's quite a rapid assembly of the building. You would basically, in about a week or two, you go from a piled foundation to a full building structure. So it's quite a dramatic process. And this gives a 3D view of the inside of the plant. So it gives you an idea of the space and some of the major equipment. So the big circle that's cut off in the top, that would be the treated water storage tank. It's relatively large, and that's rated for the fire emergency water supply that would be required for the community. Some other features, there's a small office with a laboratory bench, so for any water quality sampling and sample storage. There would be a small washroom included with the facility. On the bottom corner beside the office, there's a mechanical room, so that would include space for the boilers required to heat the water as well as the building. And beside it, it's an electrical room. And that's the end of our presentation for this evening.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from council on the design? Councilor Gunny, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I was curious if the 8 kilometers required any updating, and if we know that that has a longevity that will match with the new water treatment plant.
can answer a little bit, and I might have to defer to town staff, to Glenn for that one, but the intake was not included as part of the scope of the study for the new water treatment plant. It was discussed potentially having a condition assessment performed, but we haven't looked at that to date.
Thank you.
Did you want to add to that, SAO Smith?
Yeah, can you just repeat the question? Sorry.
Yeah, I was wondering what the viability or the longevity of the 8-kilometer water intake pipe is, and if it matches with the life of the new water treatment plant, or if we know anything of that.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Deputy Mayor. There's been condition assessments done over the years. You know, it's about the same length of the age as the plant, so you know, at some points there's been some slight damages. I think it's been about a few years ago where we had a portion of the line, like the intake, inspected, and they're showing some slight movement, I think, at that end. But there's, you know, I guess it was kind of non-conclusive at that point. There's also the distribution line that comes from the plant to the rest of the community. So, you know, this is one piece of the whole water distribution network that, you know, we kind of want to keep an eye on in future years doing studies. Same with the reservoir. Actually, that's in town by some of the Keith Broadhead ballpark there. We are asking Dylan to do some work on that, just in consideration of the change proposed in the study from the chlorine gas to, I guess it's more of a tablet-based product that's used. So yeah, there's lots of different elements, lots of sections throughout, but the intake itself, it's something that probably, you know, in future years we want to be taking a better, more complete look at. It's not, it can be quite expensive to undertake it. We'll say that through this new design there are some mitigation elements, including larger reservoirs and different new filtration methods that are thought to help with at least some periods of turbidity, because we do get high, you know, during flood breakup, right? Very small, usually small windows of high discoloration and turbidity.
Thank you.
Councillor Bouchard, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think you kind of answered some of the questions I had, but one of the questions I had was just, I know we've had some troubles keeping up with staff to run the plant, and I'm just wondering if this new plant will require more technical support or technical water treatment operators or more treatment operators. So just kind of what our staffing issues would be going forward with this new plant.
I can address a little bit of that. We did a classification process using MACA's protocols for establishing what class of operator would be required to run the facility. With the processes that are included here, it's on the high end of a Class 2 operator. So that was one of the goals for this project, was to provide a plant that wouldn't trigger a higher class of operator compared to what you have now. But again, a Class 2 operator it's considered a moderate level of operator skill.
Thanks. Anything further from council? Councillor Squirrel.
Thank you, Keith. My question is in regards to energy. Like, how does the plant generate energy? Is it diesel? If so, do you have an idea of how much that would cost annually?
SAO Smith.
Yeah, maybe I'll start with that. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So a couple different fuel sources right now currently. So just the primary source is used through propane, sort of the propane distribution line that runs through the town. Some of the peak bills we see are about $30,000 per month. So, you know, if you extrapolate, it's $300,000 to $500,000 per year currently. I think Dylan's looking at some of that right now. We've had some conversations about alternative energy and heating sources, including even requirements for heating, because we do heat the water itself. So a lot of that might come through future designs, but I don't know, David, if you want to comment on what's proposed in the study at this point beyond that.
Yeah, so the preliminary design, we focus on what heat loads or energy loads are required to run the plant. So we've done that. We've sized boilers initially on using heating oil for that activity. But we do have it in the parking lot for the next phase of engineering when we get into more detail about the business case of different fuel sources. So propane would be one of those considerations.
Thank you. I think Councilor Wani had another question.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, I had one more question. In regards to the chlorine gas replacement, I don't know if you can show me that slide again. I didn't remember about the environmental impact, but my question is based on the industry standard for replacement of that chlorine gas in the north. Is there proven better methods than others, or yeah, and in regards to the environmental impact as well?
There are a few factors that go into the evaluation. There's advantages with chlorine gas, or it is definitely the cheapest chemical to use, but it's also a hazardous chemical and it's the most dangerous. There have been accidents that have occurred in facilities, and it does require a heightened amount of training with operations as well as firefighting staff so that they're properly trained in how to deal with that emergency. For instance, if there is a room with chlorine in it that has a leak, it's very critical that you seal that room and don't allow anyone to go into it. As opposed to some facilities, when they've had a problem, the fire departments actually come in and ventilated the building, which just spreads that chlorine gas out into the surrounding area, which is not what you want to do. So there are some complications with chlorine. The operating skill level is definitely a consideration. Most of our clients are trying, on the smaller communities, want to use sodium hypochlorite, so that's the bleach solution. It's very simple to operate. You just connect the supply tank to the distribution pumps, the injection pumps, and it's quite simple to operate and understand and troubleshoot. One of the challenges with the hypochlorite solution is it has a certain shelf life before it starts to just naturally degrade. Those degradation products can create their own disinfection byproduct called chlorate. So we have to be careful on the ordering of the product and how long it's allowed to sit at site in storage. So there are some storage requirements that have to be adhered to, and some testing of the chemical to make sure it hasn't degraded. However, with Hay River, you're road accessible, so some of the challenges of more northern communities where, for instance, they only have sea lift access, some of those risks you won't have. So we expect that to be a positive characteristic with using that chemical.
That answer your question?
Yeah, just a little bit of a follow-up in regards to the environmental impact of that specific. Like, I understand about the chlorine gas and completely on board. I was more in regards to the 3 substitutes that you had mentioned there. I was more, thank you, that part explained, and then just the environmental impact of that on the town. And
Yep. As far as environmental impact, all of those chlorine types will all react in the water to form an identical molecule, the hypochlorite molecule. That's the actual disinfectant. So apart from some of the hazardous nature of the chlorine gas, they all have the same environmental effect. If in relation to if there's a leak, the chlorine gas would have a much more severe outcome potentially on the environment, however. So
thank you very much.
Chlorine is what they used in World War I it was called mustard gas. if it's not managed correctly, it can be quite a dangerous chemical.
Thank you. I just had one question, a little more, I'm sure it's been looked into, but one that might cost us if not. I'm just thinking for the waste, like solid that we're going to come up with, I understand we're going to try to backwash some of the liquid, but for the solid, we're going to have to dispose of it from the site. Is that, we have a place in town that we can dispose of that? Does it go into our lagoon, or can we landfill that, or where is that? Where are we going with that?
Do you want me to answer that one, Glenn?
Yeah, go ahead, David. I can supplement if there's anything I might have for knowledge there.
Yeah. Please feel free to jump in. At the lagoon, there's a receiving pond there where the solids can be trucked to from the water plant. So there'd be further settling of those solids to the bottom of the pond. And then I believe that the overflow from that pond would go into your lagoon.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that was just my concern there. If we were ending up going to have truckloads of material leaving town on a regular basis, that would add up pretty fast. But any other further questions from council before we wrap it up with these gentlemen? Nothing from council. Thank you for your presentation. We appreciate you guys being a couple hours ahead of us at least, and sticking out with us this evening. So appreciate the updates and the information, and look forward to next steps.
Great. Our pleasure. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Okay, announcements, award ceremonies. I just had one. Had the opportunity on Saturday to attend the Firefighters Ball on behalf of council, and another great event. Congratulations to everyone in the department for their long service awards, and thank you to all the new rookie members that were able to attend. And congratulations to Krista Gardner on Firefighter of the Year award, and to Vince McKay for 30 years on the department. Any other announcements, awards from council? Go ahead, Councillor Dufert.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to bring up how nice the town is looking with the decorations. I just want to say, especially to the library with their beautiful lights, it really is a wonderful addition to the downtown this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it does look good up there. I guess Councillor Wall's challenge was accepted. So moving on to administrative inquiries. Take it away, SAO Smith.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We'll try to keep it pretty short tonight, knowing that there's some other big items on the agenda as well. Just providing very quickly reports for the directors that are not here today. Protective Services, as you mentioned, Deputy Mayor, the Firefighters Ball was held again this last year. It looked successful, and yeah, thanks to all the workers that put that event together. I attended it as well, and yeah, it was a great job, especially our fire chief in his presentations as well. I think next year's the 75th anniversary, so look forward to maybe celebrating a big milestone event then. A note that some of our bylaw services are going to be interrupted really starting tomorrow until the end of the new year, just with some vacation time scheduled. And we are still, well, we actually have recruited to a new protective service specialist who performs municipal bylaw services. They're not starting until February now, but glad to have that person on staff, and we'll be in full municipal enforcement and protective services position at that point. A lot of work going on right now with that department on their occupational health and safety program release to the organization. So I think maybe next week actually, our management team is getting briefed on that to help support and make sure we're all in alignment with the program as it gets deployed into the new year to the organization. A lot of the protective service specialist groups very busy this time of year with other kind of Christmas holiday activities as well. So they were in the parade. They've got Santa's sleigh ride and the New Year's Eve fireworks coming up. I'll just pause to see if there's any questions for protective services. Continue. Councillor Lacusta.
Oh, okay, I can't see that on the screen there, so if, yeah, Councillor Lacusta, I believe, had a question. Go ahead, Councillor Lacusta.
I think I have a question. Did I just hear that we're hiring a second bylaw enforcement officer?
I can probably answer it, but I can turn it over to the SAO. Go ahead.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. No, we have a vacancy in that position, so just the recruiting to the one position, or have completed recruitment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, continuing on then, I believe.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Very quickly for Recreation Community Services, also that department's very busy with holiday programming, a lot of advertising out through social media and other channels. We always coordinate a sponsored skate and swim for the holiday season, and looks like we've got 74 hours already booked up through the fine commitment of organizations and businesses, I think primarily within the community. And that's up from 8 hours from last year. A little bit of degraded service levels at the Aquatic Center over the last month or so, just due to staffing vacancies. So some days we've had some shutdowns. However, we have recently added a lifeguard who's now on staff, I think just the last week or so. And we will have another vacancy filled at the beginning of January. Also getting into, through support of others in the community, the setup of our outdoor rink at Ray Benoit, at the Ray Benoit rink. So watering is occurring now. We're building up ice on that. A note that with ongoing renovations to the Vale Island multi-use park, there's no plans to put an outdoor rink there this season. And recreation, you'll see in our month-end reports that are included in your package in the recreation report, when we are now starting to report on some of our work orders, corrective and preventative maintenance work orders that are coming through our asset management software system. So I'll pause again to see if there's any questions for Recreation Community Services.
Anything from council? Nope, seeing nothing. Go ahead, SAO Smith.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. We'll go next to Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you, and good evening, councillors. Most of my update will be later on in the budget presentation. That's been our focus for the last several weeks, so that will be coming up. But just a brief overview of what's been going on. We've been supporting the transition to corporate services as opposed to just a finance and administration department. And as well, we were working hard to get the audit adjustments complete so we can have a final presentation to council.
Thank you. I'm sure there will be questions later on in the agenda, but if there's anything right now. Nope. Carry on, SAO Smith.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I'll go next to the Assistant SAO.
A couple of quick ones on the grant front. Federation of Canadian Municipalities grant applications complete. This would provide funding for a climate adaptation plan, which will help us with future third-party funding. You've seen, obviously, the grant work that's ahead of us that you'll be seeing a little later tonight. Canor Expression of Interest was filed a short time ago to support an economic development plan update, or economic development plan, sorry, and the requisite support to implement the plan. Lastly, we hope to have some positive news on some funding to assist our agricultural sector soon, so should have something in the short term here to announce. And then again, just to expand on the Recreation Department, the first phase of the asset management project will be complete next week with a handoff from the vendor project manager. So what that means is we switch to their support, and which is good. The bills are way less. Work continues to complete the Recreation Department's final assets and associated work orders. We'll finish those off and then move sometime next year into protective services and continue on. That's it for me.
Any questions from council? Nope. Please continue.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. A couple points on Public Works and Services. As I'm currently acting in the Public Works Director role due to a recent vacancy in that position. One of the key items we're working on right now is Lift Station 1. So that's gone out for tender for replacement and mitigation work, flood mitigation work. But yeah, we're having a fairly significant budget issue on that one right now. And I've met with our funders last week to update them on that and the variances and what opportunities might exist there. I'm also meeting this week with our engineering firm and the proponent that submitted a tender. So hopefully we can find some areas to sharpen the pencils on and get to a positive conclusion. But it is something that I just wanted to make you aware of. It is a risk, unfortunately, timed with our budget approval process. Airport Road flood mitigation project. So have been having some touch points with our engineering, actually hydrologists that are tied into, while they supported our preliminary design and submission for funding. Just looking to get some updated terms on our funding agreement to support that project. Flood inundation mapping. So we did receive final copies of the 2022 flood inundation maps from the GNWT, and those are used primarily for emergency planning purposes, so you'll start to see them maybe in our spring communication. But it's, the flood event itself, I guess, is heavily considered in our probability mapping development that's underway, and we do have a meeting next month with the GNWT and maybe the feds through NRCan to get a draft presentation of the flood probability mapping. At that point, we'll certainly bring forward to council for an update on those maps. Also, just on maintenance side, we have been working with the GNWT on our MOU that we have in place for maintenance of the road systems in the corridor. So some minor updates and clarifications are tied to that, tied to completing that process right now. And that's it. Open for any questions before I give an SAO update.
Anything from council? Thank you. Continue on with your other hat.
Sure, thank you. So I'll start off with, as you, maybe Facebook has made you aware, a new taxi company has started up and is operating in town. It's 2 cars, 2 drivers, and starting tomorrow, I hear. Well, North Star Taxi, I think they're going by. Anyway, the town has issued a business license and taxi licenses through our permitting process, so we wish them best of luck. There's also another application that's in front of us. But yeah, it looks like they have flexibility in their rates, so it looks like they are going with a zone-based approach to rates. So $10 per person to this zone. If you're further away, it's a different rate, but all that has to be published. I think they're new to the area as a kind of a startup, so they're trying to figure out their distances and demands and all that. So we anticipate it'll take a little bit of adjustment process for everyone as they get up to speed with the community. Otherwise, yeah, a lot of focus on budget for the last couple of weeks. And yeah, we've had 2 meetings recently with the Finance Committee to present proposed budget and receive input that's come into Cycle 2 budget presentation, which is in front of you tonight. We also had our council orientation on the weekend of November 29th. MACA supported me in the delivery of that, which was good. We thanked them for that. It was really well attended and seemed to be well received, and I think it really helps with the learning curve and your definition of roles and responsibilities and some of your risks, but also a good team building event, and did take some direction out of it to review council's code of conduct policy and or bylaw. So we will bring that forward to our policy and bylaw committee likely in the new year. Also, key element tied to the council orientation that we discussed was strategic planning. We are looking at dates to hold that session in the end of February, March, just trying to coordinate consultant and staff and counselors, so thanks for any input you can provide on your schedule for that period. Fraser Place, we're still working on putting the lots for sale through the auction, so just busy schedules primarily with that one, but advertising will be out soon, and the auction will start in January. Also related to housing, our residential multi-family grant program, we're just in the final legal review of the documents to support the grant program that is completed, and we will be advertising that very shortly. And first round of proposals will have a deadline for submission in or by February. Also working on planning services with an agreement with Stantec for professional planning needed for some minor updates, I guess, to our zoning bylaw and community plan. And that's scheduled in 2025 in the budget. And the scope of the work would include our flood zone mapping updates, some zoning for accessory dwelling units, and looking at temporary camp zoning allowances, adding some voluntary penalty improvements, and just some updates to forms and the submission process for permitting. We will have, administration's been working on a land development marketing brochure. It's an electronic type material, but it's going to include information on existing land options in town, such as Fraser Place, Aspen Heights, and Sundog. I'll also have information on our grant subsidy program and some indication of amenities and reasons for living in Hay River and choosing to develop. So we'll bring that to council for future awareness. I'm working as well on Airport Road lease agreement renewal with the GNWT. So we have a lease there for recreation purposes, although we have our water treatment plant is included in that lease, as well as our old ballpark, the airport road that we operate on, and also a RV camping area, and we sublease those out. So there are some concerns right now on the subleasing portion of the agreement, so we're working through that right now. Also, quite a bit in the news, continues to be in the news on electrical rates, so electrical power rates, quite dynamic right now, but the GNWT has announced that it will subsidize a portion of NTP's proposed rate increases. That's part of the 25% number you've been hearing. Public Utility Board has approved an interim rate increase requested by NTPC last week. I can't remember the number, I think it's 7%, but it kind of depends on customer type and zones, very complex. The town did intervene in that process. It did help knock it down. We're registered as an intervener on the other NTPC and NACA utility filings, and it's looking like these are the big ones tied to the franchise. It's looking like those GRA hearings are going to be held at the end of March. And we do have a meeting scheduled with or trying to schedule a meeting this Friday actually with the Electrical Franchise Committee, and at that the NTPC will be provided an updated presentation on the sort of assumed impact through all these dynamic changes that are occurring and will continue to occur through the rate approval process. But it'll effectively show where are we today, what are we going to see in the future. I've seen the presentation already through the draft process. You know, the 25% is not going to apply to Hay River. Will be, you know, especially with the subsidies that are being committed to by the GNWT. But we'll expect to see lower rates. Are certainly not, you know, it will nullify anything that we're seeing along these lines of 25%. And finally, just to note that the Town Social Club will be hosting their annual Christmas party this weekend, and included in the event, management will be presenting long service awards to our town employees. And that wraps up our administrative inquiries, unless there's any questions.
Thanks for keeping it brief. Any questions from council? All right, seeing nothing, thank you to administration for the updates. And moving on to new business, the Public Works Monthly Report for August. Looking for a mover. Councillor Duford, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll move the recommendation that the Council of the Town of Hay River accepts the Public Works Monthly Report for November 2024 as presented.
This is not August. Seconded by Councillor Bouchard. Any questions to the motion? Agreed to take forward? Okay, 7B, the Tourism and Economic Development Report for, I'm assuming, November. Councillor Bouchard.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I move the Council of Town of Hay River accepts the Tourism and Economic Development Report for the month of November 2024.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Gagne. Any questions to the motion? Seeing nothing, agreed to take forward? Okay, 7C, Municipal Enforcement Monthly Report for August. Looking for a mover. Councillor Gagne.
Thank you. I recommend that the Council of the Town of Hay River accept the Municipal Enforcement Report for November 2024 as presented.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Squirrel. Any questions to the motion? Seeing nothing, agreed to take forward. All right. 7D, Recreation and Community Monthly Report. Looking for a mover. Councillor Duford.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll move the recommendation that the Council of the Town of Hay River accepts the report entitled Recreation and Community Services Monthly Report for November 2024 as presented.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Gagne. Any questions to the motion? All right, seeing none, agreed to take forward? Agreed. 7E, Emergency Services Monthly Report. Looking for a motion. Councillor Duford.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll move the recommendation that the Council of the Town of Hay River approves the Emergency Services Activity Report for November 2024 as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Duford. Seconded by Councillor Gagne. And looking for a motion on 7F, the Water Treatment Plant Feasibility Study and Preliminary Design. Councillor Gagne, go ahead.
Move the recommendation that the Council of the Town of Hay River accept the results of the water treatment plant feasibility study and preliminary design and allow town staff to proceed with engagement involving stakeholders and affected Indigenous governments.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Duford. Any questions to that motion? All right, seeing nothing. Was there anything on the phone? I don't see that on the screen there. Okay. Agreed to take forward? Read the 7G Water Treatment Plant Replacement Fund. Looking for a motion. Councillor Duford.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll move the recommendation that the Council of the Town of Hay River directs administration to prepare and submit an application to the Canadian Housing Infrastructure Fund for an amount to not exceed $26 million to support the design and construction of a new water treatment plant. This direction is conditional on the town securing 100% of the project costs through contribution funding.
Thank you, Councillor Duford. Seconded by Councillor Squirrel. Any questions to the motion? Seeing nothing, agreed to take forward? Okay, and the 7I, H, sorry, we're on the excused absence. We need a mover for the excused absence. Councillor Bouchard, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I move that the Council of Town of Hay River excuses Councillor Willows from the Standing Committee of Council Monday, December 9th, 2024.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Duford. And agreed to take forward. Agreed. Moving on to the 2025 O&M capital budget. We'll have a presentation by administration, and then we'll, at some point in the presentation, we'll be going in camera. So then we'll have to come back out of in camera and rebroadcast, I believe, on YouTube. So if there is anybody watching at home, it shuts off, we will be back.
Do you want to move her to this? Or?
Yeah, we'll need a mover for the,
I
right.
lost my place here.
Okay, Councillor Gagne.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I move recommendation that the Council of the Town of Hay River approves the 2025 consolidated O&M and capital budgets as presented and recommended by the Finance Committee.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Duford. And I'll turn it over to our SAO, I believe.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Mayor. Got the, yeah, you want to put the presentation up, please, Stacy? Stacy can see if any councillors do have questions that are online. If they raise their hand or otherwise, but actually hoping that we can just hold questions to the end of the presentation, if that's okay. So you might just want to make sure to write them down, and then we'll circle back. And as Deputy Mayor mentioned, we do have an in-camera portion. It just deals with some staffing. So we'll go through the whole presentation and then get into that part at the end. So yeah, I'm going to start off. I guess first off, just want to thank staff and the Finance Committee and really the public for their contributions in preparing the proposed Cycle 2 version of the 2025 O&M and capital budgets that are in front of you today. Budgets prepared through a collaborative approach that considers really hundreds of inputs to outline your prioritized spend, which is intended to really meet service levels, your regulatory requirements, asset management needs, and some of your aspirational goals of the organization. The organization and the community, we've faced several environmental factors that influence the budget. Every year there's something that's, on the outside that forces us to consider how we're approaching our budget. This year's no different. We're really still seeing maybe not the same effects in the last couple of years, but national inflation and costs of services continue to rise, let's say, especially even on the capital side. Fairly static economy in Hay River and beyond, in the Northwest Territories at least. Seeing a lot of growing social issues and key economic and social considerations that are facing the town. I think coming out of 3 recent local emergencies and some lengthy responses and recoveries, we've moved on from some of that, but the effects of climate change, both on our infrastructure and our operations, are equating to significant cost and inflation. Some of that is factored into this year's budget. Continue to see a $90 million underfunded 10-year capital plan. It can be somewhat demoralizing and a big hill to climb. It's not effectively addressed through taxation and fees, but through continuing to find funds from other parties. A lot of uncertainty in this budget, really, on what the GNWT is doing with their core funding. We know, as Council has seen, a lot of proposed policy changes and adjustments and fights within communities on that front, and we continue to be underfunded regardless. So that's considered in the budget, and all these are pretty significant and challenges, but we do believe we have a budget that's reflected on the operational and capital strategies that are needed to better position our organization and our community for the opportunity and future success. So we're going to highlight those in more detail through our presentation. I'm going to, actually going to switch to Blair, the Director of Corporate Services, who will start off the first part of the presentation. We'll shift back and forth throughout it.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having us, and we'll start with a brief overview of the fund accounts that are maintained by the town, so that we are setting the foundation for our discussion. And then we'll walk through the timeline of this year's budget process, highlighting key milestones, and in the process we'll explain how we arrived at this point, and we'll also show how the budget aligns with our town's strategic plan, ensuring that we're staying on track with our goals. We'll review the results of the budget survey conducted earlier this year and how they inform this plan. And finally, then we'll dive into the details of the 2025 O&M and capital budget. So first, as was mentioned, we'll look at just a brief overview of the funds, the three funds that the town has. The regulatory framework for these funds are found in bylaw 2252 for the financial administration bylaw. All these funds are established by that bylaw and are regulated by them as well. So the general fund accounts for all financial activities of the town that's not covered by another fund. The utility fund accounts for all financial activities related to the operations of the water and sewer system. And the land fund accounts for the acquisition, development, disposal, and rental of municipal land within the town. And also to be considered is bylaw 2178, the land administration bylaw, which also affects that fund. So any of the expenditures that come from any one of these funds are done by means of budget. These are adopted annually, as we are doing here tonight and next week. And this provides council's direction on how administration is to spend these funds, and then to ensure compliance, an annual audit is performed, and that's also required by our funders at the GNWT. So as far as the timeline goes, we started the process by sending out a survey in October to gather feedback from the residents of the town to see what their thoughts were on it. Once we got that, then we worked collaboratively with all the departments within the organization to draft this budget. A lot of hours were spent doing that, a lot of meetings, and then we presented the first draft to the finance committee first on the 27th, and then we met on the 29th to finalize that. And the result of that is the presentation that you see before you tonight. So it's the plan that next week at the 16th at the regular meeting that the final approval will happen for this budget. Now I'll turn it back over to our SEO to discuss the planning process for preparing the budget.
So yeah, as you can see on the screen, planning is a very key function within the organization, and municipal governments on establishing direction. Most plans have a consultation tied into them, engagement with the public and other stakeholders. So yeah, a lot of this gets put into council priorities. You have a strategic plan, which is really the key document that outlines where you're trying to head as an organization. A lot of that moves into a 10-year plan. It's a kind of your asset replacement and growth that's of a capital nature. There's various operating and capital budgets. We've been producing annual business plans. It's all included in the package. That it's not in this package, but sent to council. It's gone to our finance committee, and it's available online through our website. So yeah, all of this forms into the planning and direction that we consider. We consider those as we prepare the budget and ensure that we have money to support them. On the next slide, I thought I'd spend just a little bit of time on the strategic plan. Like I said, it's a guiding document that suggests where council wants to focus and how administration will help achieve that through our resources. So some of the high priority tactics, this isn't the goals and the foundations, but tactics that are meant to achieve your overarching goals. So those that were rolling into 2025 that we looked at for budget, going from the top here, reliable water distribution, ensure that that's in place. You just received a presentation tonight on the water treatment plant feasibility and preliminary study. So that's a major asset and project for the town. We also have Lift Station 1 rebuild and mitigation. As we go into other replacement projects, infrastructure projects that are identified in budget, West Channel berm enhancements, a new solid waste facility, land selection and preliminary design. There's a cemetery expansion, some revitalizations of our Don Wright Ballpark, and Lift Station 3 replacement design, and important discussion on Town Hall and where we might be heading with it. So those are amongst many other capital projects that Blair will provide you some detail later on. One of the other strategic priorities is diverting waste from the landfill, and the key activity that we look at is the new landfill design. We're also about to move forward with some automated residential waste pickup, and that's kind of a stage one of a multi-stage plan towards increasing cost efficiencies, moving towards user pay, system for waste management, supporting future waste segregation, diversion, and recycling. Still in the plan as we talk about climate change and recovery and mitigation for wildfire, there is the Old Nifty area cleanup and planning. There's also the lagoon discharge area that was impacted quite significantly from the fire. A lot of burnt trees in that area. Still some work to do on Paradise Road and the Oxbow Snai area for fire smarting. It also plans to update our community wildfire protection plan. For flood recovery and mitigation, there's mitigation projects. The airport road raising is a major one in the budget. West Channel berm enhancements is continuing through 2025. We've got a lot of repairs to our storm system outlets along Miron Drive that were damaged by flood. Looking at Paradise Road and an erosion study for it. Flood probability mapping, and which will have implications on our building and zoning bylaw. Related to strategic housing and your interest in that area, we are deploying the multifamily grant policy, which will be executed in 2025 and probably 2026. Fraser Place sales are coming online soon. And Sundog Phase 1, where we're working with the GNWT on their interest in a long-term care facility. On the next slide, continue on some of the priorities. So supporting a healthy lifestyle, focused on recreation and outdoors. We do have some parks that we're continuing to work on, such as the Vale Island multi-use park, Hay River Golf Course upgrades, and Inukshuk Park Phase 1. Also some dog parks that carried over to next year. And the implementation of the Trails and Green Space Plan, some elements of that. And that plan was just recently brought to council. We'll look at updating and enforcing our unsightly and abandoned bylaws. Completing the electrical services franchise, finally. It's should be months away. And with that, a reduction, at least in comparable to today or maybe last month, in the power rates that are seen within the community, really saving millions of dollars within the community in spend tied to that service. Continuing on with our asset management program deployment and finding a lot of better ways to manage our assets and better efficiencies within the town operations, where we're looking at organizational design changes, really an increased focus on infrastructure and maintenance operations, and we'll also be deploying an online pay and leave system, and yeah, the automated residential waste pickup implementation. On the next plan, and just concluding on the strategic plan ties to the budget, yeah, improved engagement for the community, again through bylaw and planning documents. We have incorporated some updates to our website as well. Strengthening relationships with our local Indigenous governments, including the implementation of Truth and Reconciliation calls for action that are included in the now approved Healthy Community Strategy, and hopefully getting traction on progressing land settlements with our Indigenous governments. And the final point there is completing an update to the town strategic plan. So what does this council really see beyond 2025? And we are targeting March for that work. Next slides, I won't go too deep into it, but it provides a bit of a summary on the budget survey results that we went out and completed. So we had, I think, 82 respondents to that. So it's a small population size, but it's better than zero that's often or have shown up in the past to our planning engagement meetings. Satisfaction went up a bit from our last survey in the prior year, so went up 9% into that fair and good rating. We asked questions on service level, your satisfaction, and where you're dissatisfied with. How do we incorporate some of that into our budget? So that's we've used this as input on the roads and sidewalks front, where there's some dissatisfaction on service levels. We are adding some public maintenance staff as proposed through org changes, and increased attention to asphalt, crack sealing, and sidewalk panel replacements, ditches, and there is airport road enhancements, and also concerns arising this year through the survey on economic development. And key activity is an update to our economic development plan, which will set the path forward to where this council wants to go. On the next slide, just concluding on the budget survey, we did ask questions on taxation and where do the respondents think we should go in respect to your taxation levels and services tied to them. So about 26% saying decrease services to reduce taxes, but 65% said maintain and or increase fees to maintain or increase service levels. Some of the evolving topics, some of these, well, there's an evolving topic on the seniors and disabled tax exemption. We asked the question. There was a slight decrease in those who would like to see the cap or a cap put in place or eliminated altogether. But I do note that there's no changes or suggested changes in this year's budget from administration. But some of the other issues in town, these are common with elsewhere in Canada, but over the last few years, around cost of living, housing, social issues, and governance and transparency. So from a cost of living perspective, a little bit tied into a solid waste processing levy that's proposed. We are suggesting a 0% tax increase for residents. With housing, your implementation of the housing plan continues on. Healthy community strategy implementation, dollars assigned to that to address social issues amongst other opportunities within the community. The cost of living, well, our franchise agreement for electrical services is, like I said, going to mitigate and in some areas likely reduce initial costs tied to electrical rates. And yeah, transparency would come through increased investments in our website and communication plan updates. And also our solid waste processing levy, which moves those expenses from just being buried in your general taxation to an actual user pay system. So on the next slide here, we're going to pass it over back to Blair.
Okay, so first of all, get into the 2025 O&M budget, and just a note, especially for Stacy, just for presentation purposes, we moved a couple of the slides around to talk about O&M first and then go into budget, so there'll be a couple of back and forths there. But first, we'll go into some highlights for this 2025 O&M budget. So it's a conservative approach that's based on 2023 numbers as opposed to 2024, as there's no guarantee of the additional funding that we received in 2024. Inflationary increases have been applied to staff, both unionized and excluded employees, as well as for the costs of mayor and council, as well as a 6% vacancy rate has been included in the budget. A detailed discussion will be had through an in-camera discussion or presentation for any personnel changes, so that will be coming up later. Just a note on the proposed organizational structure, the net impact would be a reduction of 0.2 FTE or full-time equivalent, which for 2025 would result in a $100,000 decrease in net capital and O&M costs, but moving forward, it would be a $60,000 increase. We estimate that due to implementation timing. So it wouldn't happen right away, but as a result of the staged approach, that's what we estimate. So an organizational review has been completed, which has been prioritizing improvements in infrastructure management, including maintenance, engineering, and planning. Functions have been better centralized with a reduction of orphan functions, primarily by transferring responsibilities to the Public Works Department. For example, right now the Rec Department is not only managing their programming, but even projects that fall under their purview, they're managing the engineering and the project management, whereas this one would have Public Works take a more active role in that. Also included that is fleet management, major facility management, moving those things to Public Works, as well as the human resources needed to manage those services effectively, would be a better allocation of resources, which will result in increased efficiency and capacity within the organization. This organization structure also focuses on increases to infrastructure planning and maintenance, the adoption of a robust health and safety program, and community services. Going on to the next slide, as was mentioned, we are proposing a consolidated property tax increase of 2.3% overall. As SAO Smith mentioned, it's a 0% residential tax increase that we are proposing, but through commercial and industrial and institutional, the total increase would be 2.3%. More details will be provided on the next slide as we give that to you. We have also estimated a 3% charge for the use of credit cards, which would total about $42,000, assuming that 30% up would pay by means of credit card through for their property tax, utility bills, and user pay systems. But this would be applicable only to residential properties in the first year, so that's the estimate that we have been included in the budget. And once again, as was mentioned before, the residential waste processing levy will cover costs for residential garbage collection, recycling processing, yard waste, organics, oversized items, and more. It would also fund programs like curbside cleanup, regulatory costs, landfill closure expenses, and waste management transparency. It more aligns with a user pay philosophy, where those who give collection services pay a bit more. The aim is to improve cost transparency and promote better waste segregation, diversion, and recycling. So as was mentioned, it's a movement towards a true user pay system for solid waste management and processing. We recommend a multi-year staged approach to ensure a smooth transition in this regard. Also of note is a Housing Accelerator Fund from CMHC, which is to support development in Hay River. We are projected to receive $1 million in 2025, so that's also included in the budget. And our contribution to capital for this year is estimated to be $2.25 million to be included in the 2026 capital plan. So as was mentioned, this is the slide where we are recommending a 0% residential tax increase. Normally we don't bring mill rates to this discussion. However, this is just an example of how we could do that. So here we see an increase to commercial and industrial of 2.9% and a 4.7% increase for institutional. Largely that would come from the territorial government. So that's where the majority of the increase would come from. So these would be small increases for those who are not affected by the residential waste processing levy, as that would just be for, once again, residential ones. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that these property tax figures are approximate. We won't have the final numbers until we get the assessment roll early next year. And just please also note that this is separate from the GNWT school tax levy, which could still increase residential taxes. This is just the town's portion, but should the GNWT increase their levy, then the bottom line would be that there would be a slight increase to residential. Moving on to the next slide, this shows a consolidated total for the budgets for all departments with a graph there to show the percentages of what comes from where. There's a little bit more detail in department slides that follow, and we'll get a little bit more into that, but let's just look at some of the highlights. So on the next slide there, for the revenue highlights, once again, as we mentioned before, we're using 2023 numbers as a conservative approach. So that's what the figure is in there for that. We're scheduled to receive 2 payments from the Accelerator Fund. That's what the $1 million difference is in grants and donations. And then an increase in property tax revenues is not just the percentage increase, but it's also based on a 1% population growth that's been estimated, and the increased revenue requirement to meet our capital contribution targets. So therefore, the total estimated revenue increase for 2025 is estimated at $1.12 million. Going on to our expenses, a couple of highlights there. Once again, the materials and supplies are up approximately $1 million, and that's due to the CMHC programs. It's an in and an out fund, so we get the $1 million and then we put it out in grants, so that's what that increase is for. We also have a bit of an increase in salaries and wages. We anticipate some inflationary increases through the collective bargaining agreement that will be coming early next year. We've budgeted similar increases to excluded employees and council, so that makes up for the difference there. And again, we have a total projected increase in expenses of $1.16 million. Go a couple of slides down to the contributions to capital reserves, please. There we go. This is just an explanation of how the surplus is allocated to the various reserves that we have. So the bottom part of it is for what happened in 2024, what happened this year, and the top side is what will, should this budget be approved, this is how that contribution would be attributed or allocated to the various reserves. Now, there could be additional contributions based either on additional MACA funding or on updated audit numbers, but this is how we propose it at that time, or at this time, I should say. Moving on to the budget by department, we won't go line by line, but we'll just down a little bit. Yep. No. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, we won't go line by line, but we'll just hit on a couple of the highlights there. So for general government, one thing that has been included in here is carbon tax contribution of $116,000 that Hay River was to get for 2024. We have written confirmation of that, so we were able to include that in the budget. And again, the contributions from CMHC of $1 million, which is also offset by the materials and supplies there. Bank charges include that $42,000 estimate for credit card payments that will be for property and utility as well as user pay. We also have insurance increases estimates, which we received directly from the insurance company. We don't have the documents as of yet, but that was the figure that they gave us. And you'll notice that the salaries are reduced significantly. Well, that's due to some organizational changes and restructuring and moving things around. So it's not that we're losing a bunch of staff. It's just a little bit of restructuring there. For protective services, next slide, please. Thank you. So here we have included an estimate for fire call fees and cleanup fees. Those are also offset by costs for cleanup. This aligns well with the line item in the strategic plan to enforce unsightly and abandoned premises more strictly. So there would be a cost to that. The idea is that we would recover that cost, but we need that in there to be able to start the process. And these fees will be looked at in more detail later on for cost recovery to make sure that we're recovering as much cost as we can. And these wages that are in this department includes wages for the municipal enforcement officer as well as the deputy fire chief. For public works, there's an increased organizational focus on which increases the amount of salaries in this department. So as was mentioned before, with endeavoring to move a lot of the responsibilities into public works for facility and fleet maintenance, as well as some other project management, this is where it would be shown. Also, the cost of repairing sidewalks, that's one of the things that was mentioned that we need to work on. So that is what the increase to materials and supplies is mainly from, is that cost. And in this, as well as in any other department, inflationary rates have been applied to the utilities to account for any additional cost due to that. Environmental services, the next slide, please. We did include 25% of the core funding that we received from ACWA for water and sewer. We put 25% of that to environmental services. We have also included the estimate for the municipal solid waste levy, or the waste processing fee, I should say. And the salaries there more accurately reflect the actual cost of what it costs to run the landfill, as well as do any of the other environmental services. So that's just an overview of that department. The land development department, there we have included the revenue for the sale of 10 lots from Fraser Place. We've also included an amount for cost of goods or cost of land sold. There is going to be some discussion about what that cost should actually be in the future, but we have put that in there for budget purposes at this time. Next slide, water and sewer services. So the water rates that we have in here includes a small percentage increase. The rates again will be looked at in more detail at a later time. And it also reflects organizational changes that again talk to more efficient use of our resources and more allocation to to the distribution and maintenance of our water and sewer system. And again, inflationary rates have also been applied to the utilities here. Next slide, here in recreation and cultural, that one's pretty standard. Most of the revenues are self-generated, whether it be from rental revenues of the arena and such, or advertising. You'll notice here that tourism has been moved under recreation, so that's part of the revenue there. And then again, the contracted services and the wages, again, due to some additional costing, and is the result of what's in this slide. And then finally, economic development. This one's more of an in and out department, so whatever comes in through grants and other things such as the agriculture plan and economic development plan, we get grant money to be able to subsidize that, and then we put it out to consultants to get those things off the ground. So that's what that department is with regard to. Okay, so that's a brief overview. I know we went through it pretty quick, but if you have any questions at the end, we'll be happy to answer them. Moving on now to the capital budget. So if you want to go back up, Stacy, apologize for not telling you about this earlier. One more. There's some key highlights there. There we go. So a couple of highlights that we want to bring to your attention for the capital budget. So the capital 10-year plan has been previously approved. What we're presenting here tonight is the budget for what is being spent in 2025. There is a potential for additional funds once the core funding policy updates and budgets are approved on the territorial level. Sorry, but for now, this is again the budget that we are presenting. So for 2025, it's projected to have an $11.4 million spend for that. 84% of that is funded by external sources, so whether it be the GNWT or grants that we get. The estimate is from 2024 to have a contribution to capital from the O&M is $2.2 million, and for this budget is projected to have a $2.25 million capital contribution in 2026. So that's what we're hoping to be able to get. One thing that we did want to bring to light as well is with the organizational structure, the infrastructure management has been increased through the capital budget. So a couple of things that have been included in that is a project manager. We'll bring that more in-house with support from outside services, but what it results in is increased capacity for better management of the projects that we have, and which means that it'll be again more efficient, and it'll be better organized. We also have in there for an asset manager. And asset management is a key aspect of being fiscally responsible, and this structure allows for more focus on maintaining our assets, which can result in cost savings and more efficiency. And then the last part of there talks about the capital shortfall. That will be discussed more on the next slide, so let's go to that. Here we have a total funding shortfall. This slide says here $90 million. Actually, it's up to $96 million because with the water treatment plant here, we have it on there as $20 million. We just received an updated number of $26 million for the water treatment plant. That's not currently in the budget. Like I said, we just got that today, I believe, actually. So this slide just explains that even if we were to take the major projects off of the capital plan, whether it be the water treatment plant or some of the developments in town, even if we took all those off, which is in the middle portion of that slide, we would still be $30 million short for our capital plan, which is $3 million a year. To put that into perspective, even if we were to receive 70% infrastructure dollars from federal funding, which is what they say we're supposed to get, that would still require a 13% tax increase to cover the shortfall. So, for example, for 2026, we would need an additional $900,000 to bring in a total up to $3.2 million, and that would start to catch us up. So just want to help you guys to understand that that's the position that we're in. It's not, as CO Smith said, it can be demoralizing. That's the reality of the situation. We're doing the best we can to not just acknowledge it, but also work through our issues that we're facing. So going into the expenditure summary, I believe that's down a little bit there, past all that. There we go. So as was mentioned, it's $11.4 million spend for the 2025 compared to $12 million spend for 2024. So much of what's being spent this year is actually completing projects from prior years this year. We have included in our plan and in the budget some unfunded. An unfunded column, we'll get into that as we get into the departments and such. But these are projects that are identified in the plan as needed, but unless funding is found, they won't go ahead. So we've identified it as a need, but so that we don't forget about it, it's there, but they won't happen unless we find the money for it. There have been a couple of minor updates since the finance committee meeting that we told them about, but that we update you guys on too. So for one thing, that we have deleted the skid steer project from the capital plan. And there was already a line item in the budget for a sander for the attachment only for $75K, but it came to our attention that the truck that it's on is in dire need of replacement, and it's costing more to keep it and repair it than it is to buy a new one. So we have added that to this year in the amount of $225,000 to replace that truck as well. And just to note again, as was mentioned before, with the audited financial statements being completed, that will give us final starting numbers for 2024, and hopefully that'll add some funds to the capital plan as well. Next slide. So this is just a breakdown of where we're getting our money from. As we said, 84% is coming from external sources, whether it be CPI or Community Building Fund, formerly known as gas tax, from the feds and from disaster mitigation funding and other GWT or federal funding, for a total of $9.6 million, and the rest come from our own internal reserves. So moving on now to the departmental aspect of the capital budget. So here we have the column of the 2025 total, and it goes by the legend there that less than $100,000 is in the green, and between $100,000 to $500,000 is in the light yellow, and then the orange is over $500,000. So on the left-hand side, it's the 2025 total. That's what it's projected to spend. On the right-hand side is the debt or unfunded portion. Now, some of these ones could happen in 2025 should we get the funding for it. For example, with the EV, the electric vehicle charging station, that's contingent on funding from the Arctic Energy Alliance in 2025. If that happens, that project will go ahead. And for the wharf upgrades, there could be funding by ITI in 2025. And once again, if that happens, then that will go ahead. And as we're going through this, we're not, as I mentioned, we're not going to go line by line. We'll just provide some highlights. Next slide. Protective services. The big one here is the heavy rescue truck replacement. That's a continuation from previous years. The truck has already been ordered. We are waiting on delivery, but we won't get the final bill until it's complete. So that's why it's still on the budget. And then the animal shelter is to be funded by fundraising in 2025. For public works, this one, we have the biomass district heating system that's still on there. Unfortunately, our funding was denied. And so the project won't go ahead unless other funding is found, but we are working at that. We are endeavoring to see about getting some more funding for that. We also have it on there of the nifty remediation. So we have received confirmation that we will be getting United Way funding, or it could happen anyway in 2025 to be able to clean that up. So we look forward to that happening. And as mentioned by SAO Smith earlier, with Lift Station 1, there is a significant budget issue that we are working through. We hope to have a better answer for you before the next budget session. Again, next slide, Public Works roads. So most of these, like I said, are continuations from previous years. Just one note on there on the Lagoon Road fire abatement, $75,000 could be funded by MACA's Disaster Assistance Fund. So that's where that could happen potentially. And then finally, for recreation, again, there's quite a few that are unfunded. We have the cooling center that could be funded by the Climate Change and Health Capacity Building Program, or through grants or in-kind contribution. And there's other ones, the golf course, for instance, that will be funded by external sources in 2025. Looks like that's actually going to go through and happen. And then there's some others, such as the Tri-Service Trails, that could be funded by the GNWT Summer Cap program. So that's a very high-level overview of what the budget is like for both capital and O&M.
Any questions?
I'm sure there might be a couple. I will open it up to questions from council. Councillor Gagne, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm just a little curious about the difference in numbers from what was presented tonight to what was presented to the Finance Committee. I'm just curious, like, why there's a difference between what was presented to the committee to what, like, is there an amended thing to look at, or?
So the plan has been updated, the plan has been approved, and the plan is a living document that gets updated as needed. But what we did find is that there were some needs that needed to happen in 2025, and that's what we talked about. So we deleted one project like the skid steer, and then we added the sander truck to that to be able to fund it. Those were the main ones that happened. There wasn't many changes to the capital plan.
I wasn't talking capital, I was talking.
Oh, sorry.
I was talking, I'm sorry,
No,
I
no,
should
no,
have
no.
been more clear.
No.
I was talking the
O&M?
The O&M, yeah.
Yep. Okay, so one of the things that was mentioned at the Finance Committee meeting was for the credit card fees, to do, instead of doing everybody, just to do residential ones. So that's one of the adjustments that we made, was to do that. Drawing a blank now as to what some of the others, there wasn't many changes to it.
Yeah, I can't really think of any others as well. Unless you have specifics that you can.
Well, there's just a bit to what I have notes on to what was presented. I can send questions later. And I was just curious, the change from, like I said, from the Finance Committee versus what is presented.
There was just a couple things. Mostly what it was looking for, look at my notes here.
I don't think, did we fine tune any of the salary numbers with proposed org changes? I don't think so. It should be pretty, like, non-material changes, but the property tax or the credit card handling fees, to me, I think we proposed with commercial at the time, and direction was to look at residential. Yeah, sorry, I can't think of anything else either. Unless there's
I
just
noticed
small
a few
tweaks.
with the wages, and I can.
Yeah, maybe the wages.
I can devise an email later for more concerns. I was
Yeah.
just curious with the process for what was presented to what is presented again, that's all.
Yeah, mine are just inputs really coming from that. There may have been some corrections. I think the staffing position types, there was a couple that we had to look at for just salary changes. Yeah, which probably just moved them around in Public Works though, I think, but.
The thing with the project manager and the asset manager was determined that was already accounted for in capital.
Oh, yeah, it could be. Yeah, there's a couple position type salaries that were just reviewed to see where they're actually best funded through, but.
Yeah, so, I mean, again, we're not going to approve anything here this evening, so if you have some other, like, more in-depth questions, or maybe things to do with wages, because they might be position sensitive or so.
For sure.
Yeah, throw those together in an
I
email.
just was curious,
Yeah.
and I'll do a better.
Perfect.
I'll send a better email.
Yeah, and that's just, on the because I think it would be, I can only think of organizational changes unless we found some small error somewhere, but some of that's what we'd like to just discuss in camera.
For sure.
A bit, so that might show different org structure than what was presented to the Finance Committee, and then the resulting numbers tied to it.
Okay, any other questions from council? Councillor Bouchard.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm understanding the process of that. we're doing 0% on residents. There's some single-digit increases on institutional commercial, but I know some people are going to see some based on mill rates, I guess, and maybe assessments. I'm not sure if MAC is doing many changes to the assessed values of properties this year and plan to. One of my questions was, one of the first questions I have is the reserve contribution. Are we still, I know we've been trying to put $1 million in reserves. Is that still the target rate for this year?
Yeah, actually, as was mentioned in the slide there, there is for this year, it was, for this year's
2.25.
budget, it was a $2.2 million
Okay.
surplus that was budgeted for. Looks like we're going to hit the target. We hope to hit the target for 2024, which was about a 2.29 million, I believe it was.
Yeah, that's a surplus, though.
Surplus, yeah.
Are we making, but our contribution to reserves, because we use that surplus to do capital as well, right?
Yeah, so
Well-
that, sorry, go ahead.
So the contributions go into reserves and then they come out, so it's, yeah, you'd have to look, so the full contribution is the 2.some million, 2.2 or
Yep.
2.25?
Yep.
Or 2.2 actually from 2024 to 2025, and then
Yep.
2.25 goes into the 2026 budget, because that's your capital surplus from your operating budget. So all of it goes into reserves, and then your allocations come out of reserves, or I think you said 85% out of third-party funding, so 15%. I don't think we have a balances. Do we have a balances slide for?
Not in this one, we had one in the other one.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, Councillor Bouchard. I think more to maybe to your question is like, that would be, are we adding to the total balance of our reserves, or are we putting
Yeah.
money in the reserves and then taking it all out? Because I know at one point in time we were trying to build those reserves so that when you do have those, 75 or 50 cent dollars out there, we have money as sort of that down payment, or our portion of it. So maybe that's probably more along the lines
Yeah.
of what you're asking.
Yeah, I think we can probably just add a slide for the next budget that shows the, well, it's in our 10-year capital plan, which is part of your budget package, but not included in the slide deck. So we could, well, I guess we could show 24 and 25 as a comparison. And then just noting that your budget has a lag, right, where 2025 O&M budget would influence 2026 spend for capital.
Any other questions from council? Nothing on the screen yet. Councillor Bouchard? follow up?
Yeah, no, just, I mean, asset management, I guess we're seeing how that rolls out, and now we're adding a position to it, and I mean, I'm still not 100% convinced of this asset management plan, and I know some of it's being jammed down our throat from ACA, so I'm still kind of looking on the fence of how much money we're committing to this asset management and actual benefits to it, I guess. Yeah, we know we're going to be in a deficit, for things that have to be fixed down the road, I guess, but, yeah, I mean, again, you indicated we're not adding that many positions once we've done the reorg, but, there isn't a position for that being added, so, I mean, yeah, I guess I'm just going to be the critic on that particular item for now.
Okay. What do we got on the screen? Was it Councillor LaCusta had a question? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor LaCusta.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. First of all, I just want to thank the administration and the Finance Committee for putting together such a comprehensive document. It's pretty impressive for a town our size to do this level of, drill down in all these different pieces, and so I'm really impressed by that. I had a couple questions about capital planning, and then one question about what Councillor Bouchard just raised about the property assessment role. How would you like me to proceed?
I think just ask away. Yeah, you can start with one, and we'll kind of do them one at a time.
Okay, sure. Let's start with the assessment. So the So the mill rate's going to stay the same for residential property in 2025. We have no idea what MACA is going to do in regards to the assessment role. Or do we, I guess is my question. Do we, is MACA, property values in Hay River appear to be dropping. Will that be reflected in the assessment role, which means that taxes will actually decrease? Or what are we expecting from that, I guess is my question.
SAO Smith, you want to?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I won't try to go too deep into a lesson on property assessments, but like decreased value, market value is, you know, it's not reflected in your asset assessment. They do every 10 years, 7 years, a major review. But through our assessment role that we've received to date, I think it's showing a 1% kind of forced growth increase on valuation within the community. But there is still an appeal process and errors that do get adjusted through that. I think there was a bit of a comment on the, no, well, maybe you didn't ask about the school taxation, but yeah, we don't know what those will come back. Those get incorporated into your property tax bill, but it's usually pretty small from an increase perspective.
Okay, thank you. That helps me a little bit. I have a very incomplete understanding of this, clearly. From the capital plan, there are a few things that jumped out at me that didn't seem to be very well explained. And I guess one is the lift station 3 is the work on that appears to be in support of Aspen Heights, but my understanding is that Aspen Heights doesn't exist. So why do we need to work on lift station 3 if Aspen Heights doesn't exist? If the purpose of lift station 3 is to support Aspen Heights.
Go ahead, SAO.
Yeah, kind of three elements to that one's replacement. So it is the lift station that's located next to the fish processing plant in that 553 area, just behind Pine Crescent, I believe. So one, it's you know, it's an aging asset. It's not end of life, but it has been aging. So that's some consideration. But the other parts are just the elevate. So we do have plans or need to replace underground infrastructure throughout 553. It's quite desperately needed, actually. Yeah, and a lot of that, to be honest, though, is not funded yet in your 10-year plan. But parts of it are, including Pine Crescent, and yeah, some of the issues with elevations in there are not meeting our standards, and so a relocation of the lift station in that area would help address and be a prerequisite to effectively rebuilding our underground infrastructure to meet our standards. The third kind of benefit with it is the tie to Aspen Heights. If there is any development of that in the near or long-term future, it would require increased capacity through a new lift station. So, you know, the lift station or Aspen Heights, we did go out for expression of interest to developers for development yet. There hasn't been any responses received to date. However, it's something that we'll be suggesting that we have available for sale in case there is a need in the future. So it's kind of it's a combination of three factors there. Hopefully I articulated that well enough.
Essentially, without Aspen Heights, something still needs to be done.
Yeah.
In that area.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's other solutions, but this is our recommended solution.
Okay. Does that help with your question, Councillor Lacusta?
Yeah, thanks very much. I guess the next question has to do with capital planning as well. In fact, my last two questions both do. This one has to do with the Sundog development. So there's $20 million put into the capital plan for over a period of time for that. And I guess the question is, will that money be, I know there's some expenditure planned for this year, but will there be more in coming years, or will there be an assessment done as to the need of the Sundog development before more money gets put into it?
SAO Smith, go ahead.
Yeah, Sundogs has got multiple phases that have been identified through land planning. I think a 3-phase approach. In our 10-year plan, I actually have it in front of me, but it is kind of towards the end of the plan for the future phases. But the first phase is funding itself effectively, or at least we're still in negotiations and with the GM and GMWT on their contribution agreement to get the land. So that contribution would pay for essential infrastructure needed to support the long-term care center. Then we would add that to our taxation base, and with some of the infrastructure that's built there, let's say a road and access to that area, it could be made available at a lower cost then for development to commercial. It's a mixed commercial, mixed residential zone. But at this point, we don't have any identified funding to move forward with subsequent phases, such as phase 2, which would require a new lift station, an example, in that area. So it's it's out there in our 10-year plan, but nothing in recent years or in coming years.
Does that answer your question, Councilor Costa?
Yes, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I guess the last question isn't really a question, it's more of a comment, and that has to do with the town hall. $7.4 million is identified. I do recognize that that the town sees a real deficiency in the spaces that are rented right now. But I guess, and I do know that the rental is quite expensive. We're paying a lot of money for this. But just in the future, it'd be nice to see what the cost pay down would be in comparison between rent and spending $7.4 million on a new town hall, so that the councillors can then look at a comparative of the two over time. And that's just more of a comment. That's not a question.
And retire it. Then we know our revenue's coming in just at this point through tipping fees. What we don't have a good handle is on what portion of your taxes kind of go. Well, we could say the gap is filled by your property taxes, right? So through this proposal, we're saying rather than have these costs buried in taxation that no one really has an understanding of, it brings it into increased transparency to say this is what we need to recover in order to cover the costs of waste management. And we feel like that just helps inform decision making. The residents get a better idea of what we're paying for. They can scrutinize costs, they can scrutinize revenues without this question of what are my taxes paying for? I live here, I live in this part of town. So, but ultimately what it does, whether it's coming through property taxes or levy or water rates, water is a little different because that's a managed fund separate from your general fund. But recreation fees, third-party funding, it all kind of comes regardless into your net position with your income statement. And if you generate a surplus, then that goes into capital. So this year, we are proposing a small increase overall to what we did in the prior year to contribute to the capital shortfall. I will add, and Blair mentioned we were using these 2023 figures. In case that wasn't clear, that's the contribution numbers coming from MACA. So we expect but we can't guarantee it, so it's a conservative budget, that we could see increases proposed in the policy of up to $2 million per year. That would impact both capital and O&M. But where that's going to land, we don't know. We don't know yet. MAC has advised us to use 2023 numbers and not delay our budget. And
Yeah.
on we go.
Yeah, I guess my question was more just because I think it's important when we put this out, before it rolls out, that we really communicate this with the public, so that there is an understanding of what we're doing. Because to me, sitting in the coffee shop, okay, I got a 0% tax increase, but I'm paying $18 more a month. I got a tax increase, whether you want to call it a utility levy or whatever, right? So I think it's important, and especially if it's essentially a wash in the organization as okay, it's going to pay for this, and your taxes are still going to go into capital and pay for everything else. The question of what are my taxes paying for is still going to come up, and always will. But I just think it's a key, especially corridor. We don't get garbage collection in the corridor, but I'm paying $8 a month for what? I think it's important to note that this is also processing, handling. There's a cost to everything that goes into the landfill, whether it's today or 15, 20 years down the road. So I just think a pretty key information piece coming out of this, at least as much as we can do as far as kind of explaining that the best we can to the public is important. I understand it. I'm not opposed to it. There will be questions about it, and probably some loud ones.
Yeah, and I think another way to look at it too is it's one or the other, unless you want to make cuts throughout the entire budget, of course, right, or change service levels. But yeah, you could move it into taxation as another option. Keep the philosophy the same as it has been for years, which is not common. I'll say what we do is not common in other municipalities if we want to compare.
Yeah, I mean, I understand it. I'm sure it's been batted around at the Finance Committee as well. And again, I don't really have much more than this other than a few things we're going to have in camera. But yeah, I want to thank the Finance Committee and administration. I know everybody put a lot of work into this. As Councilor Acosta said, there's a lot of detail in our budgets, and that has only really been in the last few years that we've been able to get to this level through a lot of work from administration. So big thank you to them. And is it Council? Yeah, it's Mayor Jameson that has a question up there, or a comment. Go ahead, Mayor Jameson.
Thank you. I'm going to turn off the speaker here for 2 seconds. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, mine was not so much a question as I have been at the table of the Finance Committee. So just want to acknowledge all the work that went into this by our staff. Lots of give and take over the last little while, and yeah, just a huge shout out to every one of them. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of time that goes into this. I know how much time our Finance Committee put into it, so I can only imagine how much time our staff has. So huge shout out to them that it is clear and concise, and the questions are great at the table, so thanks guys for that. Also, Deputy Mayor touched on, yeah, communication is going to be key. It sounds great, but there still is a 2.3% increase, right, basically, in commercial, and there's other increases, but also in the fees that we will be paying each. But it is gone to a user pay, which is more the norm, and I think in the long run it's more clear to our residents what the money's for. So yeah, I think like I said, huge thank you to our staff and great job.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Jameson. And just another comment from SAO Smith, and then I think we'll go in camera after that.
Earlier, Councillor Bouchard had a question on our reserve balances. And this isn't the perfect picture because it's a plan and may have had some numbers that slightly changed. This is slide 10. But if on your 10-year capital plan, it does show the reserve balances on these charts here. Again, these may have changed a bit through our 2025 budget. But the top red line shows the combination of the reserves and how they are built. And this is additions and subtractions occurring. You can see as you go to 2030 some significant drops there, and then before climbing up. But kind of holding the line, going up a little bit. We do expect that we're going to see more funding maybe in the near years to help support some of our capital funding through our core funding. But that I think starts to answer your question.
Okay, thanks, SAO Smith. We need a motion to go in camera. Councillor Duford, seconded by Councillor Gagne. All in favor? Okay, so we'll go in camera. We'll take a very short recess while we clear the room.
Go.
Candace, you might want to mute.
Okay, I'd like to move.
Just, we have to, yeah, so there is a motion on the table that we had before we went in. It was moved, I believe, by Councillor Gagne and seconded by Councillor Duford. So all, or no, I guess not all in favor. Agreed to take forward?
Agreed.
Agreed? Okay, so we will move that forward to the next regular meeting, and we're looking for a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to move that we adjourn this meeting.
Thank you all. Meeting adjourned.